It was nearly 2 years ago that a large group of Donald Trump supporters stormed the US Capitol in the aftermath of the 2020 presidential election. Donald Trump was insisting at that point in time, as he has continued to do so ever since, that the election was stolen from him, that the current president, Joe Biden, did not win that election. They were false claims. He held a rally not far from the Capitol. The committee that has been looking into the events of January 6 argues that he summoned his supporters to that event and then encouraged them to march on the Capitol, that he knew there would be violence, and yet he did nothing to stop that violence as it unfolded. As you said, it was a really dark moment in American history, in the history of American democracy. A number of people lost their lives, and in the 18 months or so, the past 18 months or so, this committee, a bipartisan committee, although it is mostly made up of members from the Democrats, have been really exhaustively and very intensely looking into exactly what happened in the lead up to January 6 and also on the day itself. It has culminated in what has been a very dramatic final public hearing. It has summarised its findings. It's made these recommendations of recommending that Donald Trump face 4 criminal offences, and it's released portions of its final report. That lengthy final report will actually be released in a couple of days' time.
So what exactly has this committee decided to do? And it doesn't initiate charges itself, it recommends charges?
Yeah, that's right. These are recommendations to the Department of Justice. Ultimately, it is up to the department to decide what happens next. It is not compelled to act on the congressional committee's findings, but this is nonetheless a really significant moment. It has said in that summary of its final report today that the committee has built what it describes as an overriding and straightforward conclusion that Donald Trump was the central cause of what happened on January 6. It says that without him, none of this would have unfolded. And so it's recommended that he face 4 criminal charges. They are obstruction of an official proceeding. That largely relates to the certification of Joe Biden's victory, a congressional hearing that was taking place on January 6th. Also conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to make a false statement, and incite, assist or aid and comfort an insurrection. Now, the committee argues that he did that by encouraging this attack and then failing to put a stop to it. One of the committee members, Democrat Jamie Raskin, says that this charge of insurrection is a really grave federal offence, that it basically amounts to a rebellion against the authority of the United States.
The committee has developed significant evidence that President Trump intended to disrupt the peaceful transition of power under our Constitution. The President has an affirmative and primary constitutional duty to act to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Nothing could be a greater betrayal of this duty than to assist in insurrection against the constitutional order.
The committee's vice chair, Liz Cheney, a Republican member of that committee, really spoke to what happens from here. She said that the committee had really taken the first step in compiling this evidence, in holding these public hearings and putting together this final report. She made those comments as she criticised Donald Trump's actions in the lead-up and on the day of January 6.
No man who would behave that way at that moment in time can ever serve in any position of authority in our nation again. He is unfit for any office. The committee recognizes that our work has only begun. It's only the initial step in addressing President Trump's effort to remain in office illegally. Prosecutors are considering the implications of the conduct that we describe in our report.
Liz Cheney speaking there just in the last few hours. And Jade, any response yet from Donald Trump?
I haven't seen a comprehensive response from Donald Trump at this point in time. He did take to his own social media account to take a swipe at Liz Cheney. He posted on there sort of pointing to her loss in her Republican primary earlier this year that cost her her Wyoming seat. She has really become one of, if not the most high-profile member of this committee, and certainly an enemy of the former president. So he took a swipe at her on social media, but we wait to see if he will release a more comprehensive response. He has in the past criticised this committee as nothing more than a partisan witch hunt.
Kadia Goba is a politics reporter for digital news outlet Semafor, and she joins us now from Washington. Kadia Goba, welcome. So just before we go to today's developments, I understand you were actually inside the Capitol on that dark day last year. Just going back to that day, how frightening was it to be inside there as this mob stormed the building and people were being injured and some in fact dying?
Yeah, I think I did my first hit here, and it was it was daunting, it was unexpected. I mean, many reporters just came to work to cover the certification of Joe Biden's election, and we found ourselves putting on tear gas masks and hiding behind chairs in the Congress, inside the Capitol where I'm at now. It was it was a horrific day, and no one should go through that when they're going through work.
Yeah, and just unbelievable that was happening there.
Yeah, I think as I said, I think I did a hit here maybe several hours after rioters tried to breach the Capitol they actually breached the Capitol,
Yeah.
but when they tried to get inside the actual chamber, it was incredible.
Yeah. Okay, now let's go to today's developments. What is the extent of the evidence upon which these recommended charges are based?
I mean, I feel like the world saw it. There were multiple hearings that laid out explicitly why the January 6th committee members felt like former President Trump should be held responsible for the 4 charges that you laid out with the official proceedings, obstruction, conspiracy, false statements, and finally the incitement of an insurrection. That last one is, I mean, it's an incredible charge to put upon a former president, essentially saying that he wanted to overturn the election and incited people or encouraged people to do so.
And what are the specific statements they've pointed to that he made, and presumably there are some at the rally, which indicate that he would be guilty of such a charge?
Yeah, I mean, they showed a clip of a tweet that he said it's going to be a big day, everyone should come. There's caption of him at the rally, which was less than a mile away from the Capitol, where he instructed people, let's go to the Capitol. So they did a pretty good, like I said, they did a pretty good job of laying out all the things that were incriminating. And if we were to talk about like making the false statements or the fraudulent part, there was a hidden tape or a tape where he tried to convince the Georgia election person to like find 10,000 votes. That was pretty incriminating.
Yeah. Okay, so these are only recommendations at this stage. What's the likelihood that actual charges will follow?
Well, it's all on the DOJ, whether the Justice Department, whether they're going to entertain this. Keep in mind, I mean, I don't personally think there's a strong case here. Sorry, I shouldn't say strong case. I just don't think that, like you said, the referrals aren't binding. But keep in mind, the Justice Department they have their own investigation going on. So I would imagine that would take a little more precedence over what the committee is referring. I'm not sure they're too different or too far apart, but Justice Department does have their own. It is not a binding referral,
Yeah.
though. What is going to be interesting are the 4 members of Congress who shirked or did not participate in the subpoena process. They were also referred to the Ethics Committee.
And Kadia, what effect is this likely to have on the contest for the Republican nomination for 2024?
You know, that's a great question. I've been doing a lot of hits, and I have to say, a month ago, my answer might have been a little different. I would have said that, you know, this is probably emboldening or encouraging Trump's base, and he's very good at playing a victim. And I thought this would be a good narrative for him. But now, a month later, I don't know if that's the case. I feel like he is losing some steam among his base, and I also feel like people are just like over it. Any president needs to capture independents. And I know independents just don't want to go through this anymore. So I think it's pretty damning for the former president in terms of like any future elections.
But is there a danger that if charges were to actually proceed, Donald Trump would be seen as a martyr by his supporters, and it would further entrench conspiracy theories and the possibility of extremist attacks?
It's a great question. It's something we will have to look at. I imagine the fervent supporters might feel that way, but I do think that some of his most ardent supporters are actually moving away and looking at other candidates, whether they all of a sudden miraculously believe that the election wasn't stolen, or that they're just tired of the rhetoric and see that it doesn't really move the country forward.
Yeah. Okay, Kadia Goba, really good to chat to you again. Thanks so much for talking to us today from Washington.
Thanks for having me.